want to do basically is give you our perspective and thoughts and methodologies for how we get going with the game and how we get going on designing a robot. As from my perspective, so if you don't know us, give you a little bit of context for my perspective. We've won Washington State the last 4 years, and then this last year we finished second at Worlds. So I tell you that so that you know that what I'm saying has at least worked for us. And I'll be the first person to say that engineering still is a lot of art to it, and you may have your own methodologies and processes, and that's fine. I'm going to share how we do it. I've been teaching at King's for 7 years. I teach math and computer science and robotics. Before that, I was a software engineer for about 20 years. And I've built software, I've built large systems, distributed client-server systems. So I've got a good bit of experience engineering-wise on how to design and bring product to market. So that experience has informed how we as a robotics team work. CyberKnights is not doing FTC this year, we're doing FRC. So I'm just sharing what we got here. So if you want to kind of get a good framework for this, probably the best thing to say starting off is I generally won't let my teams touch metal for at least the first 2 weeks of the season. Sometimes it's been up to 4 weeks. I think there was a year we went beyond 4 weeks before they actually even touched parts. And I think that right there is one of the keys to our success. And if you walk away from this with nothing more, I want you to walk away from this with the idea to consider that if you're going to design something, don't start by building it, start by planning it and understanding it. And that's really the core of what I want to say. The key to success, in my opinion, is an absolutely single-minded, totally single-minded, myopic focus on the what's, not the hows. And that's a mantra with our team. It's the what's, not the hows. If you walk up to any CyberKnight and you say, it's the what's, they should finish the sentence with, it's not the hows. What does that mean? Well, let me give you a little bit of, what do I mean by a how? A how is an implementation detail, a mechanism, right? So hows are the actual thing and how it's going to work. An example would be taken from last year. Everybody played last year? Any total rookie teams here? Okay, so last year we basically had to play tic-tac-toe. And in the middle of the field was about a 4 foot by 4 foot tic-tac-toe rack with 3 rows, and the top row of pegs, I think, was 38 inches, 40 inches off the ground. So this would be a how. The robot will use an articulated arm to score on the high peg. You're talking implementation, the mechanism that the robot will use to accomplish that. That's a how. Well, what's a what? A what is a requirement. So that same thing stated as a what is the robot must be able to score on the high peg. And understanding the difference between those two is absolutely essential. Got to understand that when we start off, what you need to focus on is the what's. What must the robot do to play the game? So the first step that you got to do is, before you get started on this, is you got to understand the game. And we will literally take a week to maybe even 2 weeks just analyzing the game. We're not even thinking about a robot. We totally put the idea of a robot out of our head. The second someone brings up something specific to the robot, they're banished to Siberia. And if they do it multiple times, I literally make them run laps around the building. You cannot talk about the robot. You have to understand the game first. So to do that, the very first thing is you have to become rules experts. I expect every one of my team members to be an absolute total rule expert. I want them to know the game better than the refs do. And sometimes that's actually the case, which is pretty sad. That's the case. I test them on the rules. And if you're going to be on the drive team, you have to score 90% or better to be on the drive team. So I demand, I expect that I can walk up to any of my varsity team members and say, tell me every major penalty. And they should just be able to rattle them, boom, 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 boom. They should know every single major penalty. I should say, what's the scoring system? They should be able to score this way, this way, this way, this way. The point values are this, this, and this, this. So you've got to understand the rules and then analyze the scoring system. When you analyze the scoring system, we actually take a big whiteboard, and this stays up all year long. We 2-scale draw the field, and we list all the rules, the key rules on one side, and all the key scoring on the other. And then we use that 2-scale whiteboard as kind of the start for our discussion, and actually have 2-scale game pieces that we can move around on the whiteboard. So the first thing that we do is, in analyzing the scoring, is we enumerate all the scoring methods, all the different ways to score. And then the next thing that we do is we try to analyze what is the highest possible score, theoretical highest possible score. So we'll sit down and we'll play math for a little while and just try to figure out what is the theoretical highest score that you could possibly get. Some games that's really not possible. Like 2 years ago, it was basically an open-ended scoring system because it was all based on how high you could lift. So theoretically, if you could lift to 6 feet, you get this score. The higher you lift, the more points you got. So it was kind of mechanically limited. But determine what the highest possible scoring is, and then look at all the different scoring methods and trying to figure out what seems to be the highest risk, the lowest risk ways of scoring. So what do I mean by that? This year, can someone tell me what you think would be a high risk way of scoring?
Climbing on the bar.
Climbing on the bar, okay. No right or wrong answer to this, just what's your opinions? Others. High risk scoring. Yeah.
If one of the pendulum boxes is pretty full and you try to drop a block into it from a height, and it bounces completely in and then bounces out and you unscore,
Okay.
you're in deep cheat.
Okay, so there's risk with full baskets. Maybe dropping something and making another block fall out and you score. That's a very, very bad thing, maybe a penalty. Other high risk scoring.
Potentially cheat blocks because you have a chance of just only 4 blocks.
Okay. The whole 5-block possession is 5 blocks. Four block possession. Okay. Low risk. What's low risk scoring this year?
Scoring underneath the pendulum.
Okay, dropping into 1 point. Huh? Flag raising. Okay. Okay. So sit down and think that through. I personally, when I looked at the game, saw a really high risk scoring mechanism that nobody's mentioned, which is I find really interesting. No?
I think another high risk would be trying to strategize on balancing it because there's always that last second where it could go off.
Okay, trying to keep it balanced. Yeah, that's starting to get to where I'm thinking. Yeah.
Well, like, it's sort of hard to use an IR beacon because,
For autonomous?
yeah,
Okay.
because their IRs is just not working.
Okay.
Within your opponent's points by putting boxes on the pendulum to try to balance it.
Yeah, that's a dangerous game to play, isn't it? Scoring for them to try to help your score. I'm not good.
What about hanging from the bar, but not getting over into their zone?
Hanging on the bar and staying within your side of the field. Yep, there's some risk there. Okay, let's hold on to that for a second. Related to that, we always look for what we call the red herring. And I don't know about it this year, but we've done this would have been our 5th year, so we go back 4 years. All 4 of those years that we played, we identified, all the scoring mechanisms or methods, we identified one of them as a red herring. And what we meant by that was this was a scoring opportunity that looked really appealing and potentially had some pretty decent point value associated with it. But because of the odds of that resource becoming available or the difficulty of putting a mechanism on the robot that could do that, we decided trying to do that way of scoring was a red herring. It's something that potentially the game developers put in there to maybe lead you off track a little bit. How many go back 2 or 3 years? Can you think of some red herring, what I would, based on that definition, some red herrings from prior years?
Weighted rings and magnetic racquetballs.
Weighted rings, magnetic racquetballs. Okay? Anybody not know what he's talking about? Explain that. Can you explain those?
Okay, so last year we kind of put the rings on the tic-tac-toe like we was talking earlier. But was it a fifth of the rings? There was a certain number of rings that were weighted, that were heavier than the other ones. And if you place them on a special pen, you receive a 20% score bonus.
So to do that now, you had to be able to detect that it was a weighted ring. Which wasn't that difficult, but like for our robot, which had an articulated arm, getting the sensor out there, feeding all that back became really difficult. And we did it. We actually had a sensor on there and it worked great. We could pick them up every time, go, that's a weighted ring, put it over there. Every time, so we had it working on the robot flawlessly. But every time we sat down and thought about it and we did the math, we could almost in every case figure out a way of we could take that ring and instead of putting it over there, if we put it here on the rack, we actually ended up getting more points. So that ring was actually oftentimes more valuable placed on the actual scoring rack than using it as the weighted ring on its intended area. So that would be a good example of what we consider a red herring. So we chose not to play the weighted ring as a weighted ring. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Some red herring this year.
Red herrings this year. Anybody got any opinions on that?
The balanced, the balanced pendulum opportunity.
Okay.
Possibly lifting on the bar, because robots that the accuracy aren't, most of them aren't that really light-ish, so that might be a tricky one.
Okay.
I mean, for me, I will say that I believe that a red herring for the reason that it's literally a period, and I think it has a lot more of one opportunity than raising the flag. That's one of the
Okay.
Can you repeat that?
Go ahead.
I just said I think the flag might be a bit of a red herring because they're both the end game, and I don't think you can really sort of work that. I don't think you can really lift the end of the flag, and the thing's a lot more effective point scoring opportunity than the flag.
Other opinions? So I hand over here. Okay. Right.
For autonomous, where you push the block under the pendulum, because it's just like 5 points. It's just like, if you went that once, so it's not a big score. But if you put it in the basket, and then 20 or 40.
Okay. Okay, so you're thinking maybe autonomous scoring on the IR or autonomous is red herring? Is that what you're saying?
Right under the pendulum.
Under the pendulum. Okay. All right. I'm gonna shelve that for a second and come back to it. So we examine all the rules, become rules experts, we analyzing the scoring system, look for red herrings, look for high risk, low risk. I have told you what my thought on the high risk scoring method is. The next thing we do is we really pay a lot of attention to field layout. And what we're trying to do there is we're trying to identify, for instance, choke points on the field. Because here is my little gold nugget to you on how to play the game. It's all about controlling game resources. And you can control game resources by actually having them yourself, or you can control game resources by denying access to game resources. So when you're looking at the field, what you want to do is look at the field from a strategic perspective. How easy will it be to deny someone the opportunity to score? How easy will it be for someone to deny me the opportunity to score? Are there routes on the field, and the way that the field elements are set up, create these really narrow avenues that I have to go through to get to something that are like insanely easy to block? I park my robot here, they can't go through. Okay, so choke points, lanes of access to resources, and figuring out how to get to and control the resources is absolutely key. So we spend a lot of time analyzing the field and the layout and looking for routes, what will be the common routes taken, how can we put offense and defense. Does that make sense? Okay. Now that I've said that, what do you think about high-risk scoring? Any opinions?
I'm gonna say the flag is high risk, because it's pretty easy to monopolize into the corner if two bots are using it, you're pretty much stuck. And if you put your lines apart, you'll end up with the flag raising mechanisms. One of those mountains.
Okay, can you say that? Can everybody hear you? Say it loud.
So basically, I think the flag is a fairly high risk scoring mechanism because there are only pretty much two people who can do it. And if you and your alliance partner both have a flag raising mechanism, then you're pretty much one of using these screwed.
Okay. Comments, reactions to that?
Well, you should have good communication with the other team. And you don't both need to try to raise the flag. And then there are also rules. There are a lot of rules this year to help to make it so you cannot block the flag zone, or as we'll call it, it's what they call it.
Okay. Did you catch what he just said? He said two things that I think were the very first two things that popped in my head when you made your comment. One is you had better be working with your alliance partner. You will not win unless you and your alliance partner are one. And the way that the cyber field captain, I tell my field captain that he had better not be talking to our team. He'd better be better over working with the other team. I want my drive team so on track that my field captain doesn't have to do anything with my drive team. He can spend his entire, or she can spend their entire time working with the other alliance to help them do what we need them to do to help us win. Does that make sense? So number one is, when you get down there and you're waiting for your match and you're queued, you had better be coordinating with your alliance partner. So then, when you both have, your both end game is lifting the flag, then your game is you set up a plan. Okay, you're going to go lift the flag, and we're going to go do this. Maybe we're going to still try to score blocks or something, but you plan that out. Two, the second thing he said is there's something really special in the rules this year, which is pretty new. And that's that they've really added a lot of rules this year to prevent you from stopping someone in game from doing in-game activities. So you cannot stop someone, you cannot block them from getting to the flag. That's pretty new. That's a very new twist this year. So when I started off this by saying, you have got to be rules experts, that is a super, did I say super? Super key thing to know. You've got to know those constraints on the game because they're your advantages. So know the rules so that you can play the game to win. Notice I haven't talked about a robot at all. I haven't talked about the robot's going to have an arm. It's going to be, every time we go down to the kickoff and I stand and watch everybody looking at the new game field, 99% of the people up there, you know what the conversations are? Oh, well, what are the conversations? You tell me. You tell me. What are your conversations when you're down on the field? That's like,
like how your robot is going to do this.
yeah, exactly. Everybody's down there building their robot in their head already. That, in my opinion, is the absolute wrong thing to do. And when my team goes down there, I tell them, if I hear a single word from you about how the robot's going to work, I'm going to slap you silly. You cannot do that because I want them thinking about how to play the game.
I was just going to say it's really fun to take a flight of fancy and start imagining cool ways to do things.
It is. It really is. But in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, therein lies the path to destruction.
I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will reiterate what he's saying, because we do the same thing, trying to do not how to do it. Because what happens when you start thinking about how, you get focused on one solution that may not be the best solution for you to build or the easiest. You kind of say, oh, I really like this, and everybody gets focused on that one solution. You don't think about other solutions that are potentially much better, much easier to build, and whatnot. That's why you want to think about what needs to do, not how.
And I'll take it a step further than that. It's not just that you're going to lock yourself into a specific robot design, you're probably going to lock yourself into a specific way of playing the game. And you don't want to do that until you're confident you know the best way to play the game. Decide the best way to play the game. Decide how you're going to win the game. Decide a strategy that if we play this way, if we do X, Y, and Z, we're going to win 90% of the matches we're in. Then build a robot that can do that. How many engineers are here in the room? Actually practicing engineers, okay? How many of you that just raised your hand, when you're going to design a product, sit down and actually start writing code or go to a mill and start cutting parts? What do you do first? You have requirements meetings. You sit down and you figure out, well, what's the market requirements? What's the customer needs? You know, so we'll continue on with that. Couple hands, and we're still up. Yeah.
Another question. Seems like there's a lot of rules about not hitting the robot.
Yeah.
Is that kind of new, or are they?
That's grown since last year. The prior years was pretty much open, wide, and free, and the only constraint was you couldn't pin a robot to prevent them from moving for more than 5 seconds. Then you had to move away. Last year they started adding some rules that were pertaining to you cannot block them in and they'll prevent them from getting away from the resource dispenser. This year they've added a lot of rules that say you can't deny access to this scoring element. And that's huge. That's a radical change, which in my mind takes, this is a totally different game than any other game we've ever played before. And I think to a level, this year they flipped it on its head. Because every year before, every game strategy we came up with was completely focused on teleop. This year, I think this is the first year I've ever seen in which my opinion is teleop is the minor part of the game. So if you want my opinion, high risk scoring, blocks. Why? Why would I say that? What?
I want to just add something.
Okay, go ahead.
I think the reason that they did that this year is because when you think about it, there's not really a whole lot of maneuverment space this year compared to other years.
Okay.
That ramp takes up an enormous footprint, and the resource areas,
Yep.
they're filled with blocks. If you drive right into them, you could get docked. What's the penalty for that? It's like 2 feet.
A good drive team could utterly shut down anybody totally on this field. Why? Because there's choke points everywhere you look. All you got to do is just move your robot. You can play defense and utterly shut down block scoring to 0.
Plus the blocks, it takes a while to sometimes pick them up, and they only score like 3 to 2 points when they go fast.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
Another thing for the blocks, depending on where you put the blocks in, because it changes, you can instantaneously lose your symbols as well.
Yep.
Derek, I kind of read over the rules and it says for tracking that you can do it so long as they have access to at least one resource. What you can do, you can go near a choke point, sit there, and if to kind of one that's closer to one of the robots, and it's going to take them twice as long to go all the way around to get it, and you're still not going to get them.
Yeah, did you hear what she said? Okay, and for instance, let me toss out a strategic tidbit we used a lot last year. And it was exactly that point. And we developed a strategy, we and the team, called ping pong. And we would do exactly what this young man said at the start. We would get our alliance partner together, and we would explain our play strategy. And we would explain to them how we wanted them to ping pong. So what we would do is we'd put them on the other side of the rack, they'd score on that side, we'd score on this side, and we ping pong there. Usually 9 times out of 10, we'd put one robot on defense and run around, and they'd just be going back and try to stop whoever was scoring. So we would ping pong them. We would have both of us scoring on each side, and when they come play defense over here, we come over, score over here, and then they come, and we just get them going back and forth. You can do the same thing with what she just said this year, is get your partner working with you. Play halves of the field. So be scoring or doing whatever you can. When you see an opportunity, come over and block access, which forces them to go the other way. Your partner stops what they're doing, and they come over, and that takes coordination. But once you get two teams working like that, where you can start to control the resources on the field, okay, they're leaving us, we're scoring, you pick up defense, and come around and stop them. You can get them just stuck between the two areas of resources there.
If I'm understanding you, it sounds like you're kind of describing something similar to like zone defense. And
Exactly. And I love the analogy of basketball because what coach in basketball doesn't sit down and first figure out their basic game strategy. What kind of team are we? We're going to be a full court press team. They sit down and they analyze the game, the strengths of their team, and figure out, what is their basic game strategy. And that's exactly what you have to do here. Again, this is all about figuring out how you're going to play the game. How are we going to score? We want to win. We have to, like last year, we want to win. We have to own the top row. If you own the top row of pegs last year's game, you could not be beat. Mathematically, you could not be beat. Once we realize that, just start plastering the top row, and you got it. You literally cannot be beat. And once we figured that out, we owned most of the matches we were in. Funny thing is, when we got to the final rounds at St. Louis last year, we allowed our alliance partner to convince us of another strategy, and our opponent did that to us and they beat us. So we left our strategy. We left it, and they played our own game against us and they beat us, which took us weeks to get over. Okay, so once you've gone through all this now, you sit down and you say, okay, we think these are the best ways of scoring because trying to score this way has the highest risk, is easiest to stop, or it's the most difficult, or whatever. Then you come up with some game strategies. And usually what we would end up with in our team was 3 or 4 camps. We think we should play this way. No, we think we should play this way. No, we think we should play this way. And then what we would do is we would find some way of actually simulating the game. And we actually came up with a board game that we've used over the last number of years where we actually play the game. So for the last 3 years, before we have even gotten to the point where we're designing a robot, we've probably played 30 or 40 matches. On a 4x4 sheet of whiteboard with scale drawings on it, with game pieces, we came up with rules. It's a turn-based game, just like a pen and paper D&D kind of game, with a game master. And the game master controls make sure that everybody's doing the right thing. We came up with rules every game. If you have this kind of chassis, you can move this far. These are the constraints. And I got a handout for you which has all this in it, and on the back, some of our simple rules from a couple of years ago on the board game. But you find some way of simulating the game. And what that allows you then to do is to test those theories. And every single year we've done this, we've had 3 or 4 sets of theories. Play the game this way, play the game, so we try. And we've simulated them, and we found that the simulation is highly accurate and has shown through to be true. Now, once you've figured out how you want to play the game, you're still not going to touch metal. We may now be 2 weeks into the season. And this is all we've talked about. We're 2 weeks in, maybe. And now what we want to start doing is say, we now know how we want to play the game. We want to figure out what are the requirements now for the robot to play this way. Again, these are the what's, not the hows. We are not talking implementation here. We're simply talking about what the robot must be able to do. So what you want to do is you want to take this and boil this down into a fairly short, concise list. And everybody on the team must memorize the list, because this list of requirements now becomes your Bible, your guiding. This is your lighthouse for your robot. Here's an example. This is actually this is the list of requirements for our world's robot for last year's game. Number 1 requirement: the robot must be highly let me take that back. These were the requirements at the start of the year. These were the requirements at the start of the year. Robot must be highly maneuverable and quick. It must be very hard to push or move once it's in position. It must be able to score on the high row pegs. It must be able to score over another robot on any row of pegs. And we call this the round trip. We had to have a round trip. We wanted a round trip of less than 20 seconds with a goal of down under 15 seconds. What do I mean by a round trip? Place your robot in front of the dispenser, or now the block area. Okay? Start a timer. Say, go to your drive team. They pick up resources, they drive over, score them, come back, and now they're ready to get, that's the round trip we're talking about. Okay? So that round trip right there is absolutely essential to understand. And when you're now thinking back to your game strategy and you're looking at the field layout and the rules and all that stuff, that thing right there is one of your absolute core design criteria. How fast do we have to be? And what that's saying right there is, if you're going to score blocks, how many blocks can we score in a minute and a half? If you've got a 20-second round trip and you can only carry 4 blocks, well, now you know what your theoretical max is for block scoring, right? Does that make sense? That round trip, who thinks about the round trip? Awesome. Okay, very good. Now, do you understand that there's absolutely no implementation in any of that? Does that make sense? There's nothing about what the robot's going to look like. This is what the robot must be able to do. We brought our robot from last year, and that robot has a very unique design. I think literally it's the only robot in the entire world with that design. It's got an articulated arm and a swerve drive. You look at that robot, look at those requirements. If you walk up and you take those requirements and you hold them up and you look at that robot, you can now see why that robot was built the way it was. They didn't sit down and say, we want an articulated arm. We want a swerve drive. They didn't say that at all. What they did is they analyzed the game and they came up with this set of requirements, and they looked at these first 2 right here. Well, these 2 right here seem almost diametrically opposed, don't they? What's probably the most highly maneuverable drive system you can think of?
Swerve drive.
Okay, swerve drive. Holonomic omni wheels, right? So probably the easiest way to pull that off in FTC is with omni wheels. Anybody not know what I'm talking about? Okay, that's the easiest way to pull that off. But what's the downside of omni wheels?
Because the omni wheels make your robot easier to push.
Exactly. So what they wanted here is they quickly realized, once we get in position to score, well, how easy is that to disrupt? How high risk is it scoring that ring? It's very high risk. If you just come up and you slam into the side of the robot that's trying to put a ring up, and you moved them 3/4 of an inch, they couldn't score. Pretty high risk. So they said, how do we counter that? Well, our requirement for our robot is, once we're placed to score, they can bash themselves into us all day long and it's not going to bother us. That was a requirement. So that immediately tossed out omni wheels. Does that make sense? So that's why, how those requirements drove the design of that robot.
If you were designing a robot for this year's competition, would unpushable be a requirement this year?
Unpushable? I don't think so. Why would I say that? Why would you think I would say no?
Because
Well, let us do that. Yeah.
One reason is because there's more room for kind of lateral movement if you're scoring. The bigger score.
Yeah. So if I'm trying to drop a block into the basket, you can shove me 3 inches to the side and I can still put it in there.
Also, again, the focus is cooperation.
Yeah.
So it's not so much a defense game. Well, it's a defense game.
Okay, so there's a perfectly, he just voiced a very perfectly viable and legitimate strategic position. Say it, Robert.
Saying is, for us, this is the first year. We were thinking it's all about cooperation, so it's not so defensive pushing and other stuff. This is what important. Hence, you don't need to really have that requirement this year.
I would say, in my opinion, probably, I doubt you could come up with a game that would be playable and fun to play in which I would not say that defense isn't a huge part including pushing and smashing. It gets really, really, really rough and violent out there, which hopefully will come up in some of the sessions later. I'm just going to tell you right now, if you build a robot that can't take a pounding, see you later. See you later. You're not going to survive. It is, you will have robots going full speed, just slamming into you, backing up, slamming into you, bashing the snot out of you. It's going, if you build a robot that's going to fall apart, you're done.
Yeah, it's fun to relate that to something like soccer. It's a game of extreme cooperation, but at the same time, the players can't jostle. They know that there's no way you're going to be able to compete.
Yeah. If we were playing, we would be beating the snot out of you if you're trying to score or we were doing defense. We would just slam and try to push you out of the way. We would do everything we could to disrupt your scoring. First, we try to deny you access to the resources. If you've got the resources, then we would try to make your life as miserable as possible, trying to get that to where you wanted it to go.
I think it was last year, there was a team who didn't build a robot very robustly.
Right.
And someone slammed it in an NXT flat, so they just dragged their brain around the whole game.
Yeah. So robust design, solid design is absolutely essential.
So I'm not sure if you're getting this or not, but do you have any advice, given just what you said about the strategy defensive and offensive, where a first-year team really just want to be able to learn enough to compete really next year, or we're lost and all this stuff this
Right.
year? Do you have any advice for like, how can you sort of do this analysis to where you can at least maybe have some real limited goals?
Right.
We've always did an FLL and said we're just going to do a couple of missions when we started.
Well, that goes back to analyzing the scoring. If you can, it's perfectly legitimate to design a robot that can do one thing and one thing only.
Right.
And so my mantra is KISS, keep it simple. That's it, just keep it simple. Go back to the red herring idea. It's pretty hard to build a robot that can do everything well. Yeah, I can build a robot that can take care of all the scoring. And this year, I think, is probably the first year in which I think that's legitimately possible. Prior years, it got pretty difficult to build a robot. In fact, our design decisions were you can't build a robot well that can kick butt on all those scoring. You're going to have something that can do all of that mediocre. So our design strategy has always been pick our highest scoring method, build a robot that can do that better than anybody else, and then just play that. And it's won a state 4 times. I think you're nodding. Anything to add to that? We're going to go into that some.
Well, a little bit, yeah. So the thought that pops in my head with respect to your point about cooperation and defense is that, right, everybody is going to, at the outset of the season, look at the game, make some decisions about what your robot will or won't do, how you're going to score points, right? And then, for better or for worse, a great number of people are going to fail to meet their objectives, right? You get better with time, but your first year team, you've got new kids, all kinds of things happen. And even if you do very well, right? Even if you meet your objectives, but you get some part of this just a little bit wrong, right? You misread the game just a tiny bit, right? You're going to come up against a team, an alliance, a machine that's a little bit better than you are, right? And if you just play purely offensively, then you know at the outset what the outcome is. You know they score more points than we do, we lose. So defense, that's where defense becomes actually tremendously important, right? Because if you think about this trip time, 20 seconds, right? This assumption has there's a lot built in here, right? If we do this in less than 20 seconds in a 2-minute match, we get 6 of these trips. So what do I have to do as a defender to knock it down to 5, right? Nothing. I have to add 1 second to 1 trip. Now we've got 5 trips.
Super high risk right there.
Right? So that's where defense becomes tremendously important. And in certain games, defense is on its own completely a viable strategy.
Well, I mean, so even the first year team could focus on, I mean, would it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Say, look, all we're going to try to do is sort of keep the other team from scoring.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You could do that.
I mean,
You absolutely can do that. What I tell my teams all the time, though, is, well, when we select teams for Final Alliance, if you have OmniWheel, you're off the list instantly. We will not select an OmniWheel robot. Two, it's really not about the robot. It's about the drive team and strategy and composure and fast thinking on the field. I will take a mediocre robot anytime with an outstanding drive team over the best robot in the world and a mediocre drive team. That mediocre robot with a great drive team will shut down that robot, the best robot in the world, every single time. So again, I want to just come back to this. Don't start with the robot, because in my opinion, the robot is not the most important thing. It's your strategy, how you're going to play on the field, how composed your drive team is, how quickly they're able to think on their feet, telling up scores and look at opportunities and figure out how to shut down the other team. Because like Madison just said, if you can add 1 second to one trip, you've now knocked that down by one trip. Right? And that's a lot of points if you're wholly depending on those round trip points. So now once you've gone through all this, you now actually get to think about your design. You now get to start to think about the implementation. All right? Yeah. This has got to be driven by those requirements. And now you get to start thinking about the robot. Take a look at your requirements, break it down into subsystems, what subsystems are going to be needed to service those requirements. And one thing that we've done every year is we assign a team researcher. This is a full-time job on the team. All this person does is sit and research for us. They are a YouTube hound. The design team comes up with the idea we may want to use a screw drive. They go online and they start researching screw drives. They find everything they possibly can on screw drives or anything closely related to that online and feeds that information to the design team. That has proven invaluable. And that's 2 years ago with the lifter bot. We got it here. At state we could lift to 6 feet. We won. We're like, woohoo, we won, we're going world champ! And 1 week later we saw a video online of the team that was lifting to 10 feet. We're like, oh, okay, we're toast. Well, if we'd gone worlds with that 6-foot lifter, we'd have done nothing. Kids saw that 10-foot lift and they said, okay, we got to build a new robot. Time for new requirements. Requirement number 1, we must lift to at least, I think they came up with, we want to hit 14 feet. They came up with the requirement, we got to lift to 14 feet and completely redesign the robot around that. If we hadn't had this researcher, we wouldn't have been looking and seeing what other teams were doing. So, with this researcher can find information for the design team on specific mechanisms. They can see what other teams are doing, not only so that you can adjust your strategy, but, and this sounds radical, but you can steal design ideas from what you see online from other teams. That is perfectly legitimate. That's, unless, this all gets into IP, nobody's patenting anything here, right? So, if you see something, it's fine for you to use their ideas. Now, it is common courtesy, if you're going to do a knockoff of a robot, to go talk to that team and say, we love your robot, we love your design ideas, we want to build a robot like yours, and let them know. St. Louis last year, I loved Syzygy's. Remember Syzygy's robot last year? Absolutely beautiful robot. Got the Worlds. There was a team. I looked down on the field. There's a green Syzygy robot. I walked down and looked at it. It is a total, absolute knockoff of this one. And they're from some other part of the country. They had seen the design online and copied it. They didn't let them know about it, which is kind of bad form. But there's nothing wrong with doing that. Does it make sense? So this team researcher can feed your team lots of great information. Now you prototype, and again, all that is just quick and dirty testing of ideas. And again, we're still not touching parts. For my teams, we're probably now into the 1st or 2nd week of October, and we still haven't touched parts. Why? Because now they're CADing. CAD. Okay? We CAD everything. Our entire robot is CADed. We do stress analysis on the materials. We do movement, everything. The entire robot is CAD'd, then they take and build a robot from that. Our last 2 robots have been completely machined with, I think, almost literally no Tektronix on them at all. But even with Tektronix, if you're building a Tektronix robot, I would say still CAD the thing up. I really encourage you to do that, because you will find so many design flaws, so many problems, so many fit issues, all of that with CAD. So to summarize, really it's all about the what's and not the hows. Exactly. Requirement specification. So the formal term for this in engineering world is you are coming up with the requirements specification for the robot. My advice to you is this right here. You will be far more successful, I think, if you attack this way. A little late to start this year, next year, maybe if you are. Who does this already? Who pretty much does this already? Okay, look at that. Okay. All right. Questions, comments? I haven't told you what I think is a high-risk scoring this year. Did I? What is my thought? Thoughts. It'd be so easy to if there was the only thing you could do is score blocks. You're going to have a pretty tough time if you get up against an intelligent team, because it's going to be so stinking easy to just stop you from scoring blocks. Autonomous is a gimme.
That would include, as long as you can do your autonomous
As long as you can do your autonomous,
That's what I was gonna say.
yeah,
You
and
have to do blocks to IR.
you got to be able to do the block and IR. And honestly, I think that's of the autonomouses from the prior years. This is one of the easiest autonomouses I've ever seen. 2 years ago, you had to drive. You started in the corner, and you had to get to the far end of the field, dead center, in the middle of the field, on the other side of the field, and you had to go over a mountain. There was a 1.5 foot tall mountain you had to drive over to get over there, and you had 3/4 of an inch tolerance. You were off by 3/4 of an inch, wouldn't work. That was insane. We did it. The funny thing was, we could do it probably 7 out of 10 times at home. Got to a field, we did it once during the competitive season. We did it once in St. Louis. The entire competition season, we pulled that off twice. That's super high risk, super difficult. This year, all you got to do is hit a target about that wide. So here's how I would do autonomous. I would place my robot in a specific spot on the side of the field. When it comes up, it would bring up the IR and go figure out where it is. It's on that one, or that one, or that one. Where is it? Figure out where it is, and then just dead reckon to it and drop it in. You know what I mean by dead reckon? Just simply drive straight there in coders in time. No, you can't. So that's why you need the IR beacon to sense where it's at. I would not try to home in on the beacon. I would just figure out where it is and just drive there. Because you have got such a short distance to go, and it should be pretty... Where that's going to get difficult is your control of your chassis moving. So you're going to need really precise ability to do precise turns and distance.
Would you try to set up your robot so that it could score for a robot that did not have IR capability?
Take their block?
Online intensity?
I don't think I would waste time on that. The way that we design is we design in stages. So if the team came up with that as a requirement, we would place that as a later in the development cycle and maybe plan, okay, we'll try to have that by stage. Exactly. So another thing you want to build into your autonomous is the ability for you to delay the start movement of your robot. And that you set that up with your partner ahead of time. Okay, you're going to go first. How long is it going to take you? Okay, where do you end up afterwards? And you should, what my team would do is they would have maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 autonomous routines built up. Okay, if they go this way, then we can come in. If they go that way, then we got to go around. So they would just try to anticipate what the team partner was going to do, and they would find out, and then they'd have a menu, and the autonomous comes up, select this route, this route, this route, this route, this route, and then we can also put in a delay at the start to say, okay, wait 10 seconds, wait 11 seconds, wait 20 seconds, and then go. So sometimes you'd see our robot just sitting there, everybody going, oh wow, they blew it, autonomous, and 15 seconds later, all of a sudden the robot moves. That's by design. So we can allow our partner to go up and do their thing and get out of the way.
How important do you think having two robots on the same alliance hang is? What's the strategy? It's going to be challenging, fit very well.
Well, that's a huge design decision right there. There's a lot of difficulties in there. You have no control over your partner's robot, right? So you have no idea how they're going to work. So you'd have to coordinate that with somebody. If you could coordinate that with somebody, you'd be pretty tough to beat because now you've got 100 points. And that's going to be hard to beat. That's 100 free points right there. Are we done? Okay. Thank you. Have fun this evening.